we're usually looking to build out a phased approach to implementation. HubSpot was a great example of how we did that well, where we built out the platform itself. We actually weren't using the tool very well to begin with. And then we started working with Dynamico, and with a small team, very core team, we built out what we needed the tool to do. Phase 1, MVP. Yes. What's the MVP? And once we got that up and running, then we brought in a core set of users. And that core set of users was trained in and started using the tool. And then we started doing some optimizations over the first 12 months. Then we started to scale it out. I think it's easy to want to, because you're investing in a technology, wanting to scale it quickly because you feel like you're getting the ROI faster. But if you fail on the implementation side, that investment goes to waste anyway.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell
and Amy Weaver. I wouldn't mind going back to our previous conversation and how AI is sort of disrupting business, technology, social media, and you likened it to what Napster did for the music industry. So maybe we could dig into that a little bit and go from there.
Sure. Well, the reason I say where we're at with AI reminds me of Napster is simply because a lot of what we're talking about right now is the usage rights of content creators. And so in that way, it reminds me a lot of the evolution of where Napster came from and, you know, how the music industry has evolved since then. But I think even more than that, we saw a huge industry disruption that we weren't necessarily prepared for or expected. And so I think the technology often does that, where we discover new behaviors that emerge because of the technological advancements. TikTok is another one of those. We're talking a lot about that with our clients right now. What will happen when a TikTok ban, if a TikTok ban comes to fruition? And that may or may not come to be, but what we know is consumer behavior has fundamentally changed because of that technology. We have become accustomed to short form video. We know that search behavior has fundamentally changed because of TikTok. We know that data collection is coming from different platforms, including social, which, you know, maybe we wouldn't have expected at the advent of social. So technology reveals new aspects of human behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Actually, that's actually really congruent with so much of the stuff that we do and talk about all the time. Because in fact, it's actually, I'm going to talk about this because it's actually how we ended up with our name, Dynamico. So when we did this back in Spain, which is where we launched Dynamico, when Kristen and I decided to get together and do the business together. And we had a really smart friend of ours who was a razorfish strategist help us with the naming process. And he kept asking us, you know, what is it that you're going to be helping your clients do? And we said, well, we're going to help them navigate the change in behavior that comes with technological, you know, evolution. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because it's obviously very close to my heart, and also to what we continue to do. And of course, marketing and social are always the first to be impacted, and then eventually it gets through to, you know, sales and customer service too. But thanks for mentioning that.
So when you guys are talking about adopting new technology there internally at the Socialites, like, what are some of the considerations, and how do you make sure that it's you know, implemented well and adopted by your team?
Yeah, we as a company, especially as a company of our size, I think have a pretty sophisticated tech stack, and it's constantly evolving. And that ranges from the tools and technology we use to operate our business, communication tools, things that you might expect, like a Slack, like a workflow tool, like Asana, like a time tracking tool. And then we have technology systems underpinning each one of our disciplines, from insights and analytics, things that we pull out of the social platforms, to operating the practice of social media, to creating and building content. So all of those have multiple solutions and technologies that we could engage with. I think every time that we're starting to evaluate a technology, there's a couple of things we're looking for. One is, does it meet the requirements? So we start every process with a requirements gathering, as you do with good technology evaluation. And once we find that requirements, what do we need, and what do we want to have, and what do we need to have?
And what are you trying to solve, essentially?
And what are we trying to solve? Exactly. What's the problem we're solving for? Then we evaluate the tools that exist. And often, actually, we also take the step of talking to other people, not just getting a capabilities presentation from the tools themselves, but also talking to other people who use the tools. Because you'll find with any technology that people use it 10 different ways. I think I'm a great Excel user or PowerPoint or a Keynote user, but every time I sit next to somebody and build something, I find that they have different tips and tricks and hacks for those simple tools that we're used to using every day. And that just magnifies when you're talking about technology. So we talk to other people who use those technologies and figure out how then we want to use it. And then from there, we're usually looking to build out a phased approach to implementation. Right? HubSpot was a great example of how we did that well, where we built out the platform itself. We actually weren't using the tool very well to begin with. And then we started working with Dynamico, and with a small team, very core team, we built out what we needed the tool to do.
Kind of like a pilot?
Phase 1, MVP.
MVP.
Yes. What's the MVP? And once we got that up and running, then we brought in a core set of users. And that core set of users was trained in and started using the tool. And then we started doing some optimizations over the first 12 months. Then we started to scale it out. I think it's easy to want to, because you're investing in a technology, wanting to scale it quickly because you feel like you're getting the ROI faster. But if you fail on the implementation side, that investment goes to waste anyway.
Totally.
Yeah, you actually, that's a really good point, because I feel when we speak to companies who, for example, are already using HubSpot or are using a similar tool and are looking at changing, one of the first things that we'll hear them say is, we only use 10 or 20% of what the tool can do. And I think what we've learned in the last few years is to say, that's okay. These tools are so powerful and have so much functionality. And to your point, you can use them in 10 different ways or 1,000 different ways, depending on your particular use case. And it's almost, don't feel bad if you only feel like you're using 10 or 20% of the tool, as long as you know that you're using it to do the things that are going to move your processes and keep your team aligned and orchestrated. And that the data is flowing in the way that it should through the system. That's all you need to focus on. It's just, is it working for you, and how's it working for you?
And that may change over time. So, if we continue down that HubSpot analogy works really well in this case for us, because while we originally enabled the sales side of the platform, we're now talking about, okay, that's working really well for us. How do we want to use the content side, the marketing platform within it? But we would not have been ready for that to start. And now, because we are sophisticated enough, we've spent 2 years getting the foundational elements of the sales side right, having some optimization within it, bringing in users who are now familiar, so the capability is building internally, the skill set's building internally. We're now ready to take on that second phase of implementation and evolution within the platform. And I think, we've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah. And that's actually, this is so good. Because we see that all the time as well. When we first, start chatting to a business about what they think or their needs are from a system perspective, because or if they need help, like, what are the processes? Where are the gaps in your processes? Are you clear about your core reports? In other words, your core data. And through that process, before we even go anywhere near the technology, the implementation of the technology, we're trying to assess like where is the technology going to have the most impact in the short term, and we start there. So sometimes, in your example, you start with optimizing and enabling sales. Sometimes it's, if the sales is in a better place than marketing, you start with marketing. Or if it's, what we're seeing more and more is on the customer service side, because it's, again, this is one of the evolutions of going back to what we were talking about earlier, where it goes from it always starts with marketing from a technology evolution perspective, then moves very quickly to sales, and then ultimately to service. What we're seeing more and more of lately, because of the importance of whether it's client engagement or customer experience or whatever you call that in a business, we're more and more frequently starting on the service hub and then going to marketing or sales. But anyway, the point is, in every business, like I often say, when you've seen one business, you've seen one business. So you have to customize the technology for your specific use case. So yeah, really good stuff.
Always. Talk to us about scaling the team at the Socialites. So another guest that we had, who also was the CEO of a social media agency, talked about the growing pains, especially when you get like a new huge client and you've got to ramp up your team. How do you deal with some of those issues that you come across, whether it's like maintaining your culture or making sure that everybody is trained on the tools that exist and that sort of thing?
It's a great question. In our business, we're a professional services business in social media that's growing quickly. All of those things equal rapid change and volatility.
Yes.
And so, yes, it's about technology, but it's also about systems and process. So, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently, especially since we've been scaling so quickly, is culture. And how culture actually, it's very normal for culture to change. Culture does change over time, but sometimes we don't recognize that and we don't adopt fast enough. And we think that it's an anomaly and we want the culture to be what it was. But inevitably, every person you add to that culture will shape it, will shift it, will help to create the next iteration of what that will be. And you have to be open to that, but also look far enough forward that you're setting the tone for the expectation within the organization, because that's how people succeed. And part of that then is setting the systems and the structure that helps to support the culture and the vision that you're after. So some of the work we did last year, because we've been in business now for 13 years, which if you think about the evolution of social media over that time,
transformation,
tremendous. Yes. This is the year actually that they're predicting that social ad expenditure will outpace search, which is big. It's huge.
Yeah,
that is big.
Yeah. So if you think about that evolution over 13 years, our value proposition is very different for clients. The maturation of the platforms in our business is very different. And so the systems and structure that we need to support that has changed fundamentally. So what we did last year was we went through a whole exercise of redoing what we would do for our clients. What is our unique value proposition? Who is our target market? Getting really back to some of the basics that you would think after being in 13 years, you don't need to reset. You do. You need to go back and revisit where you're at and relative to the market fit, the client needs, those shift as well. The technological changes, those shift. And then as you're able to look forward and reevaluate what your value proposition is, the vision for the business, which you can set internally, and those cultural elements that you want to establish, the systems and structure then creates the environment for which everyone can be successful. That applies to organizational design, which is more than an org chart. It is the systems and process. It is the tools and technology. It is the value. It is the products and services, all the underpinnings of the organization. So for us, we're even looking at how the talent experience intersects with our client experience. Those two things are one and the same to some extent. And that applies to the org design. So that is sort of how we've evolved our view on the business and how to scale the business over time, is to look at all of those changing and shifting elements as one package of things that we can respond to as a business.
I want to go back.
Now,
I want to go
go
back
ahead.
to the talent and customer
Yeah.
or client experience.
Yeah.
I want more.
Yes, of how those two things
Yes.
intersect. Yeah. I mean, so in a professional services business, our talent is our business. The thinking is our business. The services we provide is our business. And that all stems from our talent being able to have a great experience. So, in our business, we have a variety of experiences and experience levels in the company. And one of the things that we're architecting is, what does the future career path of somebody in social media look like?
Okay.
Right. The industry is only about as old as a teenager. So we haven't actually seen someone's career path all the way through, starting in social media and retiring from social media. So a lot of the obligation we have is to figure out what is the talent experience from start to finish. And then therefore, as they mature throughout their career, how does that impact the service offering that we can bring to our clients?
Okay.
And then on a shorter term, as their journey intersects with the socialites, how does a client come in and sometimes wrap a relationship? It could be a project. It could be that they move on for various reasons. How does that journey unfold? And how does our talent journey unfold? Where do those two things meet, from onboarding to offboarding to everything in between?
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, Amy, I'm glad this came, that Steph, that you brought this up now again, because we haven't been hearing this as often as I thought I would on the podcast, even though, we talk about the 4 pillars on the podcast in pretty much every single episode, right? It's aligning your people, your processes, your data, and then your technology. And like from our perspective, EX, so employee experience, always precedes CX. So even if you're doing those 4 pillars of RevOps, if you're doing all of those right, obviously then that's when your NPS scores, the indicator of customer experience, goes up. It's a lot less likely, and it's really hard if your EX, so your employee satisfaction scores, are going down, right? They're typically, and and this is actually one of our measures as a business every year for our 3-year plan, our long-term plan, is that our employee NPS score is going continuously up and to the right, because we know that there's a direct correlation between that and the customer experience.
And it goes back to our point about culture. Culture and profit are also linked. But if you start with profit, you miss out on the bigger picture. As a leader of a professional services company, I think of your 4 pillars, I probably skew the most in the people column.
Okay.
Because of what you're talking about. Our business doesn't exist otherwise without the people that underpin it. It is our business. And so to take our eye off of that ball would be a huge mistake.
Yep.
So a lot of the job then for the systems and the structure and the process, all the things that surround it, the technology, is only to equip the people to be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, ultimately that's exactly right. Very cool. Yeah, so we're definitely getting and some people, including myself, might already starting to get a little anxious or excited about all the things that we're talking about, as far as all these things that you have to be doing and thinking, because of the velocity of change, happening so rapidly and increasing so rapidly. And in fact, I was just writing a note yesterday about a podcast guest that we had a few weeks ago, where, as I was sort of reflecting on one of the things that they said, we were talking about alignment, right? So alignment of the people component, the process component, the data component, and the technology component. But ultimately, what it really comes down to is orchestration. And that's, I think, our job as leaders in businesses, whether it's professional services or any other industry, is we're ultimately responsible for the orchestration. Because the note I was writing was, he was talking around if teams aren't aligned between marketing, sales, and customer service, and so that and they're not on integrated systems, for example, you might have customer services just hung up with an unhappy customer or client about something wrong with their service or product, and they get a call from the sales team because the sales team didn't know what the customer service agent had just been done because they're living in different systems. So even though they might be vertically aligned in some ways, if they're not completely aligned, horizontally as well, which is the orchestration piece, then they're still going to be making some big mistakes. And in that particular example, it has a direct correlation to a negative customer experience when the customer is going, "Are you kidding me? I just got off the phone with your support team telling them how unhappy I was, and now you're calling me to sell me something else." It's just, and then the next day they get an email from marketing, saying that, there's something, this new feature, and like,
yeah,
what?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure to get all of those things right all at once.
Yeah.
Especially the pace that business moves at today. And I think as a leadership team, what we've really been encouraging ourselves to remember is that we set the pace. There are many things out of our control. And it can feel like the pressure mounts when we all want to get an A, and we are all perfectionists, and we all have a high bias for action, and we want the business to move forward, and it's with good intent. And we are really conscious and mindful of when things need to shift, when those big rocks need to move, we need to hold each other accountable to lifting our heads up enough to see the path forward for our team. We're going through some of that right now. In fact, we have, as a leadership team, established milestones where we get out of the business. We actually go away from the business for a couple of days to reestablish our relationship and connection, which is so important to the alignment you just talked about, as well as for us to really look forward far enough so that we can dive back in deep when the business calls for it. But if we're not looking forward and we don't see those rocks coming, the pot starts to boil over and that pressure begins to mount, and you end up making short-term choices that have long-term implications.
Yeah, which of course, so again, coming back to the excitement or anxiety, whichever comes first, which is, I think it sort of brings us back to, it doesn't matter what business operating model you use, whether it's one that people are aware of or you built your own one, one of the things that's consistent in every leadership, playbook is, how do you simplify? How do you continuously simplify what you're doing? That is, one of the most important things we can do as leaders in business, because, and that's how you can tackle these things in a way that makes more sense, and where people are not getting, overwhelmed by all the change, is by continuously simplifying what it is that you're doing. And then, of course, in order to simplify, you have to be very, very clear. Everything seems to come back to, and I'm not sure if I'd like to know, from your experience, is being very clear on sort of the metrics, or the KPIs or the data, whatever you call it, that you're driving towards, right? So, the way we think about it is, you have, every business has business objectives, whether it's for the year, for the quarter, longer term. But then the next key thing is, well, so what are the key performance indicators, metrics, data points that we need that'll get us, to reach that business objective? And only then can you figure out, well, what are the actions we need to take to drive those KPIs to get to the business objective? So ultimately, what it comes down to is, so even in our 4 pillars, people, process, data, and technology, you have to start with people and culture, but you have to very quickly then move to data. In other words, what does success look like for the company, and then for each team, and then hopefully to the point of each individual, because only then can you start designing the processes, and only when that's all done, then you can have the technology implemented to make it all go, better and faster. So I don't know. Would you say that? I mean, data is a critical part of what you do too?
Data, yes, but I think data comes with some, the word is loaded.
Yeah.
It
So
means,
it's more like
means
what are your
numbers.
measurables, your numbers as a company?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, that, and it's the qualitative, because what qualitative indicators are equally as valuable, especially in our business. But I think really in any business. We, as a leadership team, we meet twice a week. It's really important that we have a cadence of alignment.
Who are the stakeholders on the leadership
in
team?
in our leadership team? CEO, myself, our VP of growth, or I'm our VP growth. I'm sorry. Let me start that off. Myself, our CEO, our VP of operations, our VP of finance, and then we have a VP of strategy, and we actually are looking to round out our final role on the senior leadership team, our VP of social experience.
Okay.
So there will be 5 key stakeholders. Okay. On Mondays, we meet and we get a lot of stuff done. It's our get stuff done meeting. We punch through the list of things to start the week off on a high note, really strong momentum. But on Thursday is our alignment meeting to talk about the indicators for success and to make bigger strategic decisions. It's a 90-minute meeting, not a 30-minute meeting, not an hour. And what we do at the top of every single meeting is we read our objective for the year.
Okay.
It resets what that meeting tone feels like when we remind ourselves we've been busy all week. What are we trying to do this year? And in the longer term, right? And in this meeting, how can we make decisions that are aligned to that? So it does include some metrics of success as well as our objectives. And I feel like that really helps us to establish the mindset to enter that meeting. And we read it out loud. So we hear it. It's not just in an agenda at the top of the meeting. We read it, and any one of us can do that. And then we have lots of decisions to make depending on the week, or things that we want to unpack together. But we have now, okay, what we're aiming for in mind. We have what are our objectives in mind? What are the strategic underpinnings that we need to have in mind as we make these big decisions that have long-term implications?
Very cool. Yeah. So yeah, as you say, that we call that whole bucket data, but that was really insightful as to how you think about your key indicators.
Yeah. And then we have initiatives that underpin all of that. Every one of those has success metrics underneath of it. And every one of those has an initiative owner. We just finished a planning process with all of our senior directors, and that team was tasked with uncovering some of the biggest problems and opportunities within the agency itself and developing core initiatives that could be elevated to the SLT. They went through a whole initiative, a written exercise to unpack what the challenge is, what their solution is to it,
it's who like would own the SWOT initiative. Analysis is what it's reminding me of.
Yeah, and written in a format. We do a lot of writing exercises now because it clarifies thought. In a world where we're in, short form communication, sometimes it's really important to get that long form right, because it forces you to think about what you really want to say and go back and refine the narrative. So they came back with 21 initiatives, all wonderful, all things that would move us forward, all things that we want to do, every single one of them, but we can't do that many.
Right.
Yeah.
So we went through that list and we combined, prioritized, found synergies between some of the initiatives, and we came back with 3. That's what we'll be doing this year. And it is important to us to execute with excellence. That is the number one thing. Technology, initiative, anything else is to take on something that we feel like we can get it over the finish line and be proud of it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Your processes sound a lot like EOS to me. Isn't that what you think of, Brendan?
Yeah, but like I said, I mean, it doesn't really matter which operating it does, but I was wondering whether we could make it through one episode without talking about EOS.
Well, it's funny because we used to be EOS, but we're not anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so we've taken the best of the systems of EOS and we've adapted them, I think, to bring back some of the humanity of the organization that we were feeling like we had lost in the chase for the next milestone. And to simplify even that system down.
Yeah.
I like that. We had another guest that kind of cherry picked all of his favorite things from.
Yeah, there's really good things about it. And then there's things that don't work for us as well as they used to, or as they maybe once did. And that's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. It's part of the evolution of the business.
Right.
Yeah, and we've been doing that so we use EOS as our operating model, but that's what it is, and I think it shouldn't be misconstrued to be something else. But what we've done is we've started adding, and in fact we did a session like the one you just talked about in September, where we got the whole team and we used a strategic planning sort of framework to identify what we thought all the issues and opportunities were that we had to work on. And then after that, we went away as a leadership team to try and to then prioritize which of these, and then we bring them back, and those formed our initiatives for this year, and we'll do the same again this year. So it's just that it's the sort of more strategic, and to your point, like the softer side of the strategic planning and direction that we feel we have to do before we bring it to EOS and go and do our 2-day annual offsite and then what have you. But I think the point is just have a operating model and a planning model that works for you, and that's pretty cool.
And an operating model is an intimidating framework, or even just the language feels like it's unattainable. It really just is a system of rituals and a cadence that you operate on. That's it. And so I think every organization, no matter how you operate, can develop those ways of working, but it's the system of working that equips you to be able to scale and to have the right discussions and to elevate and spot the right opportunities when they arise. And so that can happen in lots of forms. And whether it's EOS or not, whether it's an official operating system or not, establishing those rituals. What are the things that we do consistently? And the cadence? How do we have these conversations? How does communication flow within the organization? How do people align? Where are decisions made? Is a really important discussion for every organization to have.
So I'm a strategic coach, and are you familiar with that? And so I use a lot of the strategic coach thinking tools, and then we're now bringing that to sort of more and more leadership, and eventually, because it's all comes back to what you were saying around the people and culture part. It comes down to unique ability of the team that you have, and leaning more and more into that unique ability, but while having a very clear structure of what needs to be done as a company. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. But you're right. You were talking about that sort of space to think, and allowing people space to think and write, and that's been the most helpful thing for me. For these, what Dan Sullivan calls the thinking tools that he's created over the last 50 years in Strategic Coach.
Yeah. I mean, we call it, when we do it, we call it Bezosing something, because it's the Jeff Bezos model, right? And we take some of those things pretty seriously, where you should have shopped it, you should have come back to it, you should have really come up with a recommendation, and then the expectation is, and we do this sometimes in our meetings as well, that we'll sit down and read the document together. Again, his philosophy is anybody can fake their way through a meeting, but let's just take the time and do it here so everybody is working from the same set of assumptions. And then it's fresh in your mind. And then we have a real healthy discussion. We do that. Sometimes we do it as a pre-read so that our full time together, especially for a busy leadership team, can be spent in discussion. And alignment, rather than making your case. You've already made the case. We got your case. You made all the proof. You architected the proof points beautifully. We understand what you're trying to solve. We understand what your recommendation is. And now we're ready to push on it. We're ready to press on it. We're ready to bring in our new perspectives on it, and then come out with a solution. And we've gotten a lot faster because of that model.
That's really cool. One other thing I just wanted to touch on quick that you mentioned earlier, which has also been an interesting trend that we've seen in these conversations, is you alluded to the fact that when you're adding people to the team, it's it should be seen as a culture add, not a culture fit, right?
Yes.
And and you mentioned that earlier when we were talking about the pace of change and the pace of growth. And of course, the more you're growing, the more change will happen, right? So if you're not growing, you can, the change is a little easier to handle. But if you're adding people and you're adding customers continuously, and you're adding leads, or whatever numbers are going up are going to add to the complexity and therefore to the change that will need to happen, whether it's with your, and ultimately will affect the tech stack that you mentioned earlier. So you were talking about, and coming back to the sort of technology impacts behavior, human behavior. And again, so the more you're changing, the more the tech stack continues evolving, or you end up with tech bloat, which is another thing that we talk about from time to time. But it's this whole thing of continuous improvement is what it ultimately comes down to. But knowing, so really drilling down, what are the areas that we continuously need to be improving. So do you think of sort of 3, 4, 5 big buckets of things that you're continuously thinking about, that you sort of focus on, that need to be continuously improved?
Well, I'm going to take the number out of that question. I don't know about 4 or 5.
Yeah, okay.
But I'll tell you what I think about when it comes to continuous improvement in technology is, one is that any change for the organization is human change. It's behavior change. So you're managing change within the organization to implement something new, whether that's simply a new meeting that you want everybody to rally around, or it's a new technology that you're implementing, right? Different ends of the spectrum. All of that requires some behavioral change. And to miss that component of implementation means you missed the boat. It will not be a sustainable change if you haven't thought about what that means. And I'll give a personal example. I have pushed against, I've worked within creative organizations forever, and I have pushed against some systems that I feel like are redundant to my work. One of them is our project management tool. I've had many, many, many people try to get me to use it. I look at the roadmap, I can imprint it on my brain, and I walk away and I'm like, I never need to look at that again. It was my executive assistant that got me to see it differently. He set up the tool in a way that made it so easy for me to understand the benefit. He set up the tool in a way that took me no time to use it. Those two things are critical, because if the end user can't see the benefit of using it very clearly, very simply, distill it down to the core, they're never going to adopt it. It's going to feel like one more thing. That's how you know it's successful, is if it feels easy.
Yeah.
And then the ease of use is the other big part of it. If you're making somebody's job harder, they're not going to use it. If it adds another thing to a busy schedule, they're not going to use it. So ease of use and the end benefit are two things that I would think about as part of any systems change. The people management change, right? If we're talking about how do you change behaviors, those are two big ways that you can create sustainable change.
I need to get, is it Anthony back on the phone? I need his help.
It is Anthony. You need his help.
I need his help. Help me see the light of project management software, Anthony.
Yeah, he's really, really changed my mind.
Yeah.
Awesome. In a good way. Yeah.
I think a lot of, professional services businesses, especially in the creative space, would love to write a book about project management. It seems to be one of those really slippery things that, and we can definitely speak from experience on that one. But so you're actually talking to one of, if we had to single out one of our biggest focus for this year when it comes to the importance of what we're trying to communicate to our clients and prospective clients, it's exactly that. It's about all the things that lead to successful adoption of new technology. Because again, if the training is not sufficient to allow them to see how their lives will be easier and simpler, and the tools are easy to use, they're not going to adopt the technology, and all the time and the software cost isn't even is actually a small part of the total cost of the opportunity of getting the proper technology in place.
And there's a huge opportunity cost if you don't.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And so it's easy to look at the number that's in the OpEx budget.
Yeah.
And go, that's the cost of this technology. It's not.
Right.
It's the opportunity cost of all the other things that you're not doing because you didn't implement that correctly. Or if you have to go back and redo something. We've been there. We've made lots of missteps where we implemented something and it didn't go right the first time. You end up either having to circle back or finding another solution. That's costly for the organization.
Yes.
Yeah. As we call, we call those mistakes.
Mistakes. I like that.
I mean,
I'm going to adopt that. Mistakes.
Yeah, that's how we learn. I mean, that's the only way to really learn is by trying things, and if they don't work, then you try again.
Well, dare we put you on the spot and ask about some more details around your mistakes from the past and what you took from those?
Sure. I've got many to choose from, but I'll choose one that's actually, within the last 3 years. So it's, within my time at the Socialites. But when I first came on board at the Socialites, we were starting a website project. I walked into the middle of a website project. Now, I've worked at lots of agencies where we've done large scale website builds. We've done
for the agency,
builds.
not for a client.
No, for clients.
Oh, okay.
But this was our own website that I'm talking about for this project. But yes, I've been part of lots of other technology builds. And so I stepped into the middle of this project with a lot of assumptions. New role, a lot of assumptions in my brain. This is how we're going to get things done. This is the way I know how to run these kinds of projects. And because I'm wired for action, and because I hadn't taken the opportunity to fully evaluate the situation and set the pace, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier. I sprang into action. This was my chance to prove to the organization, as I'm new into this role, that I can wrestle this thing to the ground, and what a hero I'm going to be. That didn't go so well. I knew in my core that project was going to go off track. There were some signals I had gotten along the way that we weren't hitting some key milestones that I was used to. I started to uncover and ask more questions about what our internal sophistication and capability was. I started to recognize some of the disconnect of where the project should be, where it was, what the lift was going to be to get where it needed to go. And I didn't make the call soon enough. I knew it. And nobody would have faulted me for making that call sooner, to say, look, we're not going to launch on time, but if we push it back by 3 months, that's going to feel like a long time. I know we want to launch it by this date, but if we push it 3 months, we're going to have the product we want. Nobody would have faulted me for that call. I didn't make it. And I think one of the lessons I learned from that was to take the beat and was to get more curious and asking the questions sooner. I mentioned, I am just wired to get stuff done, and that has served me really well in my career. And I also know that I need to surround myself with people who have different work styles, different perspectives in the business. I often use them as advisory counsel. That's why you have a team. Leadership is not a solo game. And it's important that we have diversity in thought, diversity in perspective within that leadership team, because there are perspectives that will say, did we consider when I hadn't considered that? Hey, did you know it's okay to slow down? Hey, we've been here before. Let's call ourselves back to who we are and what we really want out of this project. There's a lot of great learning in that. And to this day, we still don't have the website we want. We're going to be rebuilding it. That's one of those projects that we're going to have to circle back to. Yeah. We've made some upgrades to it since we originally launched it, but we didn't. Because we succumbed to the pressure of time. That's not a project that we would have said we took the time to do ourselves justice and getting this over the finish line in a way that we're proud of. And that's okay. Those things happen. They happen within the business. As the leader on that business and the leader on that project, that one keeps me up at night sometimes, because I think about the wasted effort. But it's not wasted effort if you take it into the learning moving forward.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, totally. That's the only real mistake you can make is not learning from
Yeah,
those.
you win or you learn, Brendan.
You're either winning or you're learning. That's right.
Yeah. So a lot of learning.
Yes.
That's what leadership
Absolutely.
is, right? There's a lot of learning. I think early in my career, I would have thought I would have reached a point where I would have had all the things figured out.
If only.
And that has not come yet.
Yeah.
I no longer anticipate that it will. And that's part of the reason that this business is so fun and why leadership is hard. It's a hard job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you embrace the learning side of it and appreciate the service to the business, it's a really rewarding one too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, so with your, if I may ask, the on the website project, have you been able to sort of identify like what the biggest obstacles are to getting that done, other than time and money?
Well, we've been working on quite a few things in marketing. So this is one of the things to scaling marketing. So I think we started with the wrong problem. We wanted a website. We really needed to scale a marketing discipline. And yes, every company needs a website. We need somewhere to send people. But when I stepped into the marketing seat over growth, so in our growth practice, I oversee both sales and marketing within the growth discipline. I stepped back to really figure out the system of marketing. And the first thing was to make sure that we have dedicated resources. We didn't have dedicated resources. We were pulling from different areas of the company because we're a marketing business, right? Marketing expertise sits in every corner of the company. So it's easy to pull in brains, but it's not if you actually want to move initiatives forward.
Yeah.
You need dedicated resources. So we started there first. Who can we rely on that we can free up in the business to dedicate their time because it's important to us? And they own it.
And they have time to own it. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and that's a hard decision to make because you're pulling them out of billable work.
Yes.
So you have to be confident in the ROI of it. But from there, then we established the systems, the rituals, the process, the cadence of the way that marketing was going to work. And it starts with one thing and we scale it. So scale doesn't have to apply to the entire business. In this case, we're talking about scaling marketing. So we send people to Social Media Week. Well, what do we do with Social Media Week? Yes, we sent people to an event. We had live content from the event happening, right, in real time that we're posting and publishing to our content that fills our channels for that week. In addition, we published a blog that went into our newsletter. We sent a POV to our clients. That one thing became many things. And that's the scaling of a piece of content and therefore the marketing practice. So if we go back to the website, that's what the website needs. The website needs us to be able to think long-term enough about how we scale the content system underpinning it. And so for us, that would be getting our case studies in order, getting our awards in order, getting our content and the stories we want to tell about what we do, understanding how we want to serve up our products and services. Some of those other things remain a little bit more consistent, but that's really what we needed to get our arms around first before we can then go back and revisit what the website is. The website is just the culmination of all of those elements and stories of marketing. It's a vehicle. It's a mechanism. But I think what we started with is it's the thing. And then when we got to filling the thing, we realized we didn't really have a whole lot to say.
Yeah. And the reason I ask it, because we've obviously been through the same challenge ourselves multiple times, and is because, and like I've been involved in website projects for 15 years now, and now far less frequently, but I still catch myself thinking how I thought 15 years ago when, WordPress was pretty much, the game in town. And again, you forget how technology and has changed how websites function today. So it was just interesting when you use that example. I'm like, I wonder what are the challenges that, especially seasoned leaders who've been around website projects or other technology projects for such a long time. I think we're at a disadvantage to someone who's straight out of college and is now building websites on the latest platforms and technologies, where they like, why are you complicating? Why are you complicating what you're doing when we can iterate this thing on a daily basis?
But it's focused on the user now, and that was not the thinking when you started working on website projects.
Yeah, and we thought of them as static beings once upon a time, and they are not. No. They are dynamic. They are changing, and that's why I talk about like, well, what's going to feed the system? What's the content going to be? Because it does need some management, right? And so to think about it as something that you can put up and just walk away from is
short-sighted.
It is short-sighted. That is not the world that we live in anymore. It's a live, living and breathing channel, communications channel. So, executing the website is no problem. It's really thinking through the storytelling behind what we want to say as a company. And it's the old adage. Yes, we've all been in and around marketing companies, but it's the old adage, the cobbler's kids have no shoes. It's the last thing we pay attention to as marketing companies. We tell our clients these things all day long. And so the marketing practice for us has been, that is the number one thing that we're focused on, is doing for ourselves what we would tell our clients to do. And so for the last 12 months, that's what we have been building. So it's to make sure that our channels are live and that we're able to tell great stories, that we're able to do some testing and learning within those platforms. You can see like when things go live, we're often leveraging trends like we would for our clients. Sometimes we're talking about our products and services. Sometimes we're talking about the awards. So we have content pillars built now for our own brand that ladder up to our marketing objectives. And one of those things is driving leads. Right. But it doesn't start with just that, because if we're not telling the right stories, we're not going to get the right leads anyway. I don't care about volume of leads. I want great leads.
You guys need to check out the Content Hub for sure. That's what I'm hearing.
That's up next.
Okay.
We're going to give you a call about that later this week.
Oh, yeah.
No, we ourselves internally are in the same spot.
Yeah. I mean, because now we of course have had access to it for as long as you have, but we're very excited about it.
We can explore it together.
Yeah. No, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts?
I don't know. That's a big question.
Any words of advice that you'd like to...
advice, things people should start doing, stop doing, something you would tell your 21-year-old self? I mean, we can go any direction with this.
My heart is really for leadership and people.
Okay.
And so managing the people within the organization first and foremost, and not losing sight of that in a digital era.
Okay.
Is probably the number one thing that's on my mind today as a leader, is how to continue to maintain and promote and foster healthy relationships when we don't break bread together the way we used to. We don't sit around the conference room tables the way we used to. And yet we still need to be able to have those deep relationships of trust built to push the work as far as it can go, to be as innovative as we want to be, to make sure that everybody is accountable to their work and the work is fun. And there's a lot of digital tools that take some of that away. And there's a lot of digital tools that add to it. And so we're trying to always find that right balance between the people and the technology. But I think right now we're in a moment where we're leaning back into the people and saying, what do we need to equip the work at the relational level that seems to have diminished with technology, which is an interesting thing for us to say, being in a social media company where that is what we do all day long.
Yeah. And I think I love that, because I think, and the most ironic thing that everybody's challenged with right now is, I believe this is more important now than ever. And that with AI being such a major focus right now, because AI cannot and will not be successful unless the people are in the right place in every organization, because the people still have to do the creative, valuable work to push the buttons that will help AI make their jobs easier, better, more fun. And
if you're not careful, you fall into a commoditization category. So, technology is great in so many ways for reducing the load mentally in the actual tasks, but it can also strip out some of the humanity of a simple conversation, which then has big implications when you think about cultural shifts within your own organization about then how do we facilitate in a creative industry the same energy around ideation, innovation. Many companies are struggling with this right now. How do we maintain the cycle of innovation when people are not sitting physically in the same space?
Yeah.
We cannot go back to the world that we used to live in. So that is a false expectation. If that's what you're hoping for, is that, well, I'll just somehow go back into the office. That's not our approach.
No.
Our approach is to fundamentally rethink what are the components that made those things great, and how can we apply them in a new way? And it might even be as simple as when we're on Zooms, when we're on phone calls, we are always off mute. We're on camera and we're off mute, and we don't multitask.
Yeah.
And those simple things showcase the respect of the same thing that you would get from an in-person interaction, where that person is getting your full time and attention.
Yeah.
So it's just facilitating new ways of doing similar or same tasks.
Are you guys fully remote, or is it a hybrid?
We are not. We are hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah. I am remote.
Okay.
We have a handful of remote employees now, but the bulk of the company sits in Minneapolis, but we are not full time in the office.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, I would agree. And in fact, one of the examples that I guess we all read about recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, Nike was saying how they're really struggling with their innovation since.
That's the exact example I had in my mind when I said that.
And that's.
But it's the same at Google. It's the same everywhere.
Yeah. So we're all figuring it out together. But it definitely feels like we're getting closer. We're not there yet, but again, it's all about progress, not perfection, right?
Yeah, and we hire a staff where we have a lot of Gen Z on our staff, and so we have to figure these things out. And we've come to not just terms with it, but we actually really appreciate the opportunity to think ahead and to think about what new generations in the workforce are needing and wanting from the workplace that are different than generations of the past, and what they uniquely bring to it as well. And so while other organizations will lag because they don't have to figure it out yet, we want to lead those conversations about what's next.
I have 3 other questions I could ask you, but I'm going to...
We'll let you get
We're
back
just
to your
getting going,
day.
Brendan.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us today. It was actually a great way to get to know you a little bit too. And, I look forward to, the opportunity to spend more time together at some point. Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.